thanks for clicking. Chances are if you found this video, you're interested in the experimental class or the Sling TSi. I'm Kade, and I'm about to embark on a build assist here in Australia. So the channel's going to have three main aims for me, and selfishly it's going to be quite Australian in its focus. Because I think when I've looked at all of the different productions that have been made available on YouTube, the one thing that lacks here down under is an Australian perspective on firstly how the build assist program works here in Australia and introducing global aviation products and Errol and how that process works. So I'm going to show you the real inner workings of how that comes about and what my experience is, and also how the build transpires through that process. The second component is the Sling TSi itself, again related to Australian conditions, including the cost of the airplane, the maintenance side of things, how we fly the plane here in Australia, and its uniqueness here in our marketplace. And then the third component is going to be about the adventures across Australia, which I've got a massive project next year, which I won't introduce quite yet until we get a little bit down the track. But we've got a really big adventure planned across Australia, which I think everyone will get a lot out of as well.
So the first couple of videos that I wanted to go through, including this one today, are a couple of the cost related and also the benefits of owning a Sling TSi here in Australia. I just don't think there's a lot of content around that really breaks all of that down. So the first video, or today's video, is going to be all about the costs and what research I've done in terms of what makes the Sling TSi a real viable alternative in terms of an aircraft here in Australia.
When taking a look at the sheet, you'll notice a couple of things down the bottom here in purple. I've calculated fuel burn to be roughly at about 30 litres per hour. I think there's a little bit of fat in that. I think I'll get better usage than that, but I wanted to do it at a worst case scenario. Our engine replacement for a Rotax 916 here in Australia is roughly about 60k. Prop replacement for our duck propeller is going to be roughly about 10k. All right, so firstly, let's start talking about fixed costs. The first line item was also one of the most important for me to tick off when I started the build. Getting a hangar space locally I knew was going to be really tough here in Albury. There's very limited hangar space available. It's only 2 kilometres from my front door, would have been handy, but I just wasn't able to get into the market. I did, however, get a space in Corowa, which is roughly about 40 to 50 kilometres away. It's a small country airstrip, nice and quiet, really good community feel. And with that, I was also able to get a pretty sharp rate. So in terms of hangar space, I'm expecting to pay $4,160 per year. This fixed cost will go across all line items, regardless of how much I fly. The second fixed cost line item is insurance. This is also my most costly line item per year. I'm a relatively low hour pilot, sitting roughly on 130 hours currently. And although this will show upside in future, it is what it is at the moment. We're also lucky here in Australia that Sling Australia, with Errol's help, has an underpinning body that helps all Sling owners share the cost of insurance. In terms of insurance costs, again, across all line items, I expect to pay the same regardless of the amount of hours that I fly. I'm estimating this to be $6,600 per year. Just a little note on insurance. The more hours that you have, the better that price will be. So although my situation is quite high, $6,600 per year, a pilot coming into a Sling with a lot of hours is going to see a lot better number than what I've been able to achieve here. Our third and fourth line items, engine reserve and prop reserve, you'll notice have got a small asterisk. The engine replacement costs I expect to be roughly 60k, and the prop replacement is going to be around about 10k. I also have done numbers with this in and out of the total number of costs per hour, and we'll talk about this later on in the sheet. Right now though, I wanted to try and get that number across all columns to show you what that reserve will actually mean. You'll notice with our reserves, the more we fly, the higher this cost will go. Unlike the two fixed costs above, this will begin to eat into our reserve cost. Turnover time for these are 2,000 hours, and you'll notice as we progress, that cost will get higher and higher. So in terms of our engine reserve per year, to start off with 100 hours, we're expecting $3,000 per year. Our prop, $500 per year at 100 hours. As we go through to 120, 3,600, 600 for the prop. At 140 hours, 4,200, 700 for the prop. And then finally, at 160, 4,800 and 800 for the prop. One of the great things about the experimental class and also the build assist here in Australia is our ability to be able to do our own maintenance on the plane. All of these workings will be done as if I'm doing the majority of maintenance on the plane myself. Obviously for major issues, that'll be going to our local lamey. You'll see the cost is broken up into 50 hourly or oil change, and then our annual cost. Again, with these numbers, especially early on, I think I've probably been a little bit heavy on the number, but it is what it is. Similar to our hangar, parking, and insurance line items, these numbers will occur every year regardless, with the exception of the 50 hourly. If we're not flying anywhere near that number, that would turn into an annual. However, for argument's sake, I'm just going to do the numbers as they are. So for the 50 hourly, I'm estimating roughly about $250 of incidentals there. For annual, I'm estimating, this is a brand new aircraft, to be roughly about $1,500. I've tried to understand this number as to whether or not it's right with new owners, and it seems to be it's around about the figure, but could be a little bit less, particularly with the warranty situation, protecting the aircraft in the early days. Incidentals are exactly that. Could be anything, mostly landing fees here in Australia. We are pretty lucky in terms of the majority of the airports in country Australia that most don't attribute too much landing fees, but obviously in our major cities, we'd be expecting to pay some landing fees and whatever else may be needed with the aircraft ongoing throughout the year. This number I've attributed at 100 hours to be roughly $500. This is the start of our variable costs. And again, this will go up the more usage that we apply to the aircraft. The next line item is fuel. This was one of the main reasons why I decided on the Sling TSi. The ability to be able to use unleaded fuel here in Australia is huge. Currently, avgas is around about $2.80 per litre locally, whereas I can get unleaded fuel here for roughly about $1.65. Once again though, in terms of this line item, I wanted to be a little bit cautious with my numbers. I've worked out unleaded cost to be roughly about $1.80 over the course of the 12-month period, and also the fuel burn being at 30 litres per hour, which I'm expecting to get much better than that. So in terms of our usage, we're looking at $5,400 for 100, $6,480 for 120, $7,560 for 140, and then finally $8,640 for 160. Okay, so now we've got all our numbers plugged into the sheet. I'm going to quickly revert all the bottom numbers just to quickly show you the numbers, because that's ultimately what you want to see, and then we'll discuss each line item. So here it is, the total cost to own a Sling TSi for a very low hourly pilot at 130 hours here in Australia. You'll see the total number here is inclusive of our reserves. So please take that into account when you're looking at this number. I haven't actually worked out below without the overhauls what that number would be, but you can pretty quickly look up there and work that out. Total costs over 100 hours is going to be $21,910. And then where I think I'm going to be is roughly about $23,790 per year, and so on throughout the line items. That works out our cost per year or per hour to be $219.10 for 100 hours. For me, I'm looking roughly at about $198.25. You can see here in terms of the sheet itself, the more you fly, the more those fixed costs start to get diluted with those extra variable costs that start to get included. The more you fly, the less per hour it will be. I've also included below the cost per hour without the overhaul. This is really important for me, and it's been something that's been churning through my head. The reality is I'm 43 years of age, and if I fly 120 hours per year, I'm looking at roughly 16 and a half years before I even need to consider that overhaul. May have a prop strike or anything like that that could be unforeseen, but the reality is the number that I'm actually going to use for my budgeting purposes is going to be this number here. You could argue and say, hey, look, in the end, the reserves are going to be impacted in some way, and it'll probably more than likely be the sale price. But it's something that I don't need to worry about right now. So I'm going to be using this cost of $163.25 without the overhaul. Now let's talk about the sheet in its total and some of the things that a new owner may need to consider. The hangar parking, I think I've got a reasonably sharp rate here for that one. So that fixed cost I've done pretty well with. The insurances, I know something that's going to improve as I fly more. I think the break for the Sling TSi in terms of the current insurance company that we are with is roughly about 250 hours, and I'll see an improvement in premium. Don't quote me on that, but I think it's roughly around about that. And that should be gathered in the first year, so I should see upside in that next year. The engine reserve and the prop reserve, I think we've discussed that enough. Take it, leave it, whatever you believe. The maintenance costs, I believe, is where the Sling TSi shines. Firstly, you get to know your aircraft by building it, but then also secondly, you're able to maintain it using the appropriate courses here in Australia to be able to do so. Bit of a disclaimer there, if there's anything that's major with the plane, I'm going to be taking it to a lamey. Incidentals, I think that probably could be a little bit undercooked. So maybe there's going to be a little bit more there in terms of landing fees and just things going wrong with the aircraft that are in my control. Maybe it's a little bit undercooked, maybe it's bang on. The fuel, I really intend to try and use unleaded wherever I possibly can. In some airfields, it's going to be impossible because it's going to be avgas only. But the reality is that I'm going to be trying to use unleaded wherever I can. And that's the cost that I'm trying to work things through. So there you have it. That's the total cost of a Sling TSi here in Australia, year one, for a low-hour, 130-hour pilot.
Thanks for sticking in with me on the first video. It's not going to be my best work. Hopefully I'll get better as we go through. If you liked it, please like it and subscribe to the channel. And my next few videos are going to be all about the build assist program itself. But I've got one more video to share before that, which is why I actually chose the Sling TSi. And then from there on in, it will be into the build assist program itself, up at Heckfield in Queensland. And I'm looking forward to bringing all of that to you guys. Thanks so much. Please like and subscribe.